Hi there. Welcome and thank you for joining me today for Sunday School. It's so good to have you with me. Today, first of all, we're going to talk about rain and water. First of all, about rain. You know, sometimes we complain because it's raining too much and we wanted the sun to shine, but we really do need the rain. I looked up a little, some information on how much average precipitation the state of Wisconsin gets. And it told me we get 32.6 inches average per year. And you know, I kind of thought about that and I thought, no, I don't know if that just talked about rain or if that talked about snow too, because it seems awful low if it would include snow. Because you know, during the winter we can get, what, 2 to 3 feet of snow in a winter, I believe. So I'm thinking maybe that just talked about rain. So why do you think we need rain? Rain brings us water, right? Look at all the ways we use water. You think of when you get up in the morning, how you brush your teeth, you wash your hair, maybe take a shower or bath, you wash your face, then you eat breakfast, and there's probably some water that goes to making your meal. Your mom and dad use the water for doing the laundry or for cooking your food. Your dad or mom use water to water the lawn. And just think in summer when it's hot, you want to go swimming in a pool, you got to have water, right? I think we're kind of spoiled because we're so used to that we can just turn on the faucet and we have good, clean water to drink or to use in any other use. So how much of the human body do you think is made up of water? Some of you probably know this already because it's a pretty typical question, but I found out that a baby's body is approximately 75% water and adults is about 50% water. So half of your body when you get older is water. That's why it's very important to drink water, because as you know your day goes on, you use water. And if you don't drink enough water, you get dehydrated and you can get really sick. Especially in summer when it's hot outside, you really want to keep drinking that water. You know, kind of back to rain. I'm sure most of you live in Sheboygan or around Sheboygan and have gone to the lake and seen how high the water has been this last year. The water has gone over the jetties. There's hardly any beach. If you walk by the river, you can't even walk all the way around the river. They had to close it off because the water was so high that it was going up onto the boardwalk and you couldn't walk. Now, I've lived in Sheboygan all my life, which is a long time, and I don't remember ever seeing the water that high. So we've really seemed to have a lot of rain, a lot of snow maybe that's causing this. So what thing I want you to do this week, if you have time, is to make a rain gauge. I made a rain gauge. And what you do is take a bottle, like a soda bottle, take the label off of it, you cut the top part of it, you know where the spout is, or the top of the bottle, take the cover off, turn it inside, so the cover goes inside and makes kind of like a funnel for your rain to come in. And then I put marks on it, marking how much rain. Now I haven't put mine outside yet to use it because I wanted to show it to you today. But I think I might have to do that. And really, I'm recording this on a Sunday and it's supposed to maybe even snow out tonight. So I might have to put this outside. But when I think about it, I'm going to have to put it someplace where it's kind of stable because this is pretty light. You know, usually when it rains, it's windy and I don't want my rain gauge blowing away on me. So this might be something for you to try to make this week. Ask your mom and dad if they have a soda bottle and they could help you cut this. Make yourself a rain gauge. Kind of interesting. That way you can measure how much rain we get. Now today's Bible story is about the widow of Zarephath. Basically it's coming from the book of 1st Kings, chapter 17. So I'm going to read you a lot of that story out of the Bible, and then we're going to discuss it and kind of make a timeline of what all happened and kind of bring to life how this story relates to us. So the first verse I'm going to read to you is 1 Kings chapter 17, verse 1. A prophet named Elijah said to King Ahab, "In the name of the Lord, the living God of Israel, whom I serve, I tell you that there will be no dew or rain for the next 2 or 3 years until I say so." 2 or 3 years without rain. Can you imagine what that would all affect? How we wouldn't have any water. And you know who it would affect the most is just think of the farmers. Many of you probably know a farmer or have been to a farm. They need rain, right, to keep their crops growing. If their crops don't grow, we don't get food. So the farmers would really be hurting, I think. So why do you think God would do something like this? Why would God say it's not going to rain for 2 or 3 years? Well, I'm going to go back a little bit in our Bible story to chapter 16 of 1st Kings, verse 29. In the 38th year of the reign of King Asa of Judah, Ahab, son of Omri, became king of Israel, and he ruled in Samaria for 22 years. He sinned against the Lord more than any of his ancestors. So this would have been Ahab, son of Omri. So Ahab was the king, and it sounded like he sinned against the Lord many times. So that's why the verse I just read, chapter 17, verse 1, Elijah said to King Ahab, the Lord God said there will not be rain for the next 2 or 3 years. So what do you think this tells us? Why did God do this? Well, you know, when the story takes place, Ahab is the king, and Ahab sounds like he did some evil things and worshipped idols. Well, that kind of made God mad. You shouldn't be worshiping idols, correct? We should be worshiping God because he's the one that takes care of us. Ahab angered God. So God's going to correct or judge Ahab to show him who God is. So basically he's kind of punishing Ahab, but along with Ahab, he's punishing a lot of his people also that are going to have to go without this water. So God wants to who created the water is going to let him know the source of all water. So now I'm going to read the remainder of chapter 17, and then we'll go over a timeline and talk about what this all meant and what all happened in our story. So it's kind of an interesting story. Then the Lord said to Elijah, "Leave this place, go east and hide yourself near Cherith Brook, east of the Jordan. The brook will supply you with water to drink, and I have commanded ravens to bring you food there." Elijah obeyed the Lord's command and went and stayed by Cherith Brook. He drank water from the brook, and ravens brought him bread with meat every morning and every evening. After a while, the brook dried up because of the lack of rain. That must have scared Elijah, wouldn't you think? The Lord said to Elijah, "Now go to the town of Zarephath, near Sidon, and stay there. I have commanded a widow who lives there to feed you." So Elijah went to Zarephath, and as he came to the town gate, he saw a widow gathering firewood. "Please bring me a drink of water," he said to her. And as she was going to get it, he called out, "And please bring me some bread too." Well, now let's think about this. She knew there wasn't going to be rain for 2 or 3 years. So I'm sure any water she had or anything she had was very cherished. And I don't know if she was really real keen on sharing it with someone. She answered and said, "But the living Lord your God, I swear that I don't have any bread, and all I have is a handful of flour in a bowl and a bit of olive oil in a jar. I came here to gather some firewood to take back home and prepare what little I have for my son and me. That will be our last meal, and then we will starve to death." "Don't worry," Elijah said to her. "Go on and prepare your meal. But first, make a small loaf from what you have and bring it to me, and then prepare the rest for you and your son. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. The bowl will not run out of flour or the jar run out of oil before the day that I, the Lord, send rain." The widow went and did as Elijah had told her, and all of them had enough food for many days. As the Lord had promised through Elijah, the bowl did not run out of flour, nor did the jar run out of oil. Sometime later, the widow's son got sick. He got worse and worse, and finally he died. She said to Elijah, "Man of God, why did you do this to me? Did you come here to remind God of my sins and so cause my son's death?" "Give the boy to me," Elijah said. He took the boy from her arms, carried him upstairs to the room where he was staying, and laid him on the bed. Then he prayed aloud, "O Lord my God, why have you done such a terrible thing to this widow? She has been kind enough to take care of me, and now you killed her son." Then Elijah stretched himself out on the boy 3 times and prayed, "O Lord my God, restore this child to life." The Lord answered Elijah's prayer. The child started breathing again and revived. Elijah took the boy back downstairs to his mother and said to her, "Look, your son is alive." She answered, "Now I know that you are a man of God and that the Lord really speaks through you." So it's kind of an interesting story how she took care of Elijah even though she didn't really know for sure where food and everything was going to come from. But she did it anyhow. And then what happens? Then her son dies. And God, through Elijah, brought him back to life. So today we're just going to talk about a timeline of what happened on our story. So first of all, Elijah made a declaration. There was going to be years without rain. Then God made some instructions. He said to Elijah, "Go hide by the brook and you will have enough water and I'll have the ravens bring you food." So that was God's provision, that the ravens would bring him meat. So every day, what did it say in our story? The ravens, which if you know what a raven is, it's a black bird, came and brought Elijah food in the morning and at night. So that's a lot for ravens to bring. You know, ravens only have a little beak. So the next situation Elijah had was the brook dried up. Now that had to really scare him because he's doing what God's telling him. He's out in the wilderness depending on this brook for water, and it dries up. So God's instruction told him to go to Zarephath, to the city of Zarephath. God's provision was he told them that there'd be a widow there that would give him food and shelter. So okay, so that's what Elijah did. He did what God told him to. These people really had a lot of faith in God to follow him and do what he told them, because, I mean, they easily could have died with no water or no food. But the widow had food and shelter when Elijah got to Zarephath. So then God's provision. The woman had hardly any flour or any water or any oil, and I'm sure she was scared. Like I said in our story, she was afraid her and her son were going to die because they didn't have enough food. But God kept refilling the oil and the flour and making sure they had enough water. So she had enough, her son had enough, and Elijah had enough. But then what happened? Then the widow had a situation where her son got sick and died. So Elijah prayed. Elijah prayed that he could revive that child, because he felt so bad here. This woman was taking care of him. And what happens? Her son dies. So God's next provision, God revived the child. So what does the timeline tell us about how God cares for those who worship him? Right? God takes care of all of us. As long as we worship God and don't worship false idols or other things, and have faith that God will be there for us. So what does the timeline tell us about when God provides? God always provides, right? Like I kind of said earlier, how we kind of take for granted that we just turn on our faucet and we have good water. Well, I think we have faith that God will provide for us, or our parents will, or God sends people to take care of us that will provide for us. So what does the timeline that we talked about tell us about obeying God? Seems like our blessing seems to follow our obedience. I mean, look at how Elijah got told to do all these things. First, he had to go tell the king there wasn't going to be any water for years. And then God told Elijah, well, go by this brook and there'll be water and I'll send food and everything will be good. But then he ran out of water, and God told Elijah to go to Zarephath and there'd be a widow there waiting for him to take care of him. So I guess it kind of tells us that we kind of got to listen to what God tells us and do what he says, and everything will turn out all right. So after looking at our timeline and reading this story, we can thank God that God will always take care of us no matter what. Okay, so now let's talk about God sightings and highs and lows that we've had. I just want to go over some highs and lows that Aaron Robley had sent in. He has some highs here from, well, it must be about 2 weeks ago now. His high was that he got to spend time with his mom. His low was that he only got to spend a few hours playing with friends, and he'd like to spend more time playing with them. His God sighting that week was that it was really nice weather to walk his dog outside. It felt cool at first, but once he was walking about a quarter of the walk, the weather got super nice. Then this last week, he got to play amongst his friends, and even his sister's friends was his high. His low was that he had to clean up the living room because there were lots of Legos in there. Yeah, well, that happens, you know, you put your toys out, you got to clean them up. His God sighting was, it's been a really nice week outside. The weather has been great, at least for Wisconsin. So let's think about your highs and lows or your God sightings this last week. I kind of had a God sighting today. You know, I was thinking about my Sunday school story I was going to teach to you and talking about water and rain. And this morning we took our grandchildren for a walk in Evergreen Park, walked past the river, and the river was really high and running fast today. And you know, we've had a lot of rain lately, so I'm thinking maybe that's why. But we even kind of talked with our grandkids about how high the water was and how fast it was. And it just kind of thought, well, isn't that funny how I was going to talk about that during my story today, and I went for a walk in the woods, and that's like one of the first things we noticed. So that was a God sighting. You know, then we have highs and lows. Well, I would say probably my high for this week was having my grandkids sleep over last night, and we carved pumpkins, which is always fun with our grandkids. But I did have some lows this week. I have another grandson who's like about 6 or 7 months old, and he was sick this week, so that always makes me worry, makes me low. Then I have an aunt who's 89 years old, and I found out that she tested for COVID-19, positive for COVID-19 this week. So of course that made me sad and very low. So it was kind of a lot of lows this week and a lot of things to worry about. And I kind of, and here's kind of another God sighting. Every morning when I have my coffee in the morning before I go to work, I always read a little devotion out of the upper room. And it so happened the day after I found out about my grandson being sick and my aunt testing positive for COVID, and I was worrying, the story that day was for someone who's overwhelmed by worrying, and there's a Bible reading from Matthew chapter 6 verse 27 that said, "Can any one of you by worrying add a single hour to your life?" You know, that really hit home for me that day, and I thought, gosh, what a God sighting. Here I've just been worrying about all these things, and the next morning I get up and that happens to be my verse to read that day. So kind of, you know, things just happen, and if you follow God and listen to what he tells you, things will be okay. So for this week, I want you to think about your highs and lows. Talk about them with your mom and dad. Send them in to us because we'd love to share them with everyone. And think about God sightings. They're out there. You just sometimes have to look a little bit harder than what you want to. So let's close with the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Okay, you have a great week, and we'll see you back here. Come back next week. I won't be teaching, but I know somebody else will be. Have a great week. See ya. Bye-bye.